Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Červená Barva Press book launch for Marble Dust by Gary Metras. And I'm really excited to have this launch today. I just would like to read a little bit of a blurb that Harris Gardner wrote for Gary. From Greece to Italy and the rarefied air and memories of mountains in Austria, Switzerland, and the mysteries of Stonehenge, marble dust merges all these into a seamless literary tapestry. And I love how he put that. So I thought that was very beautiful. And I also would like to read a little bit about Gary. He was appointed the inaugural poet laureate of the city of East Hampton in 2018. His essays, reviews, and chiefly poems have appeared in hundreds of journals since the 1970s, including America, American Angler, Boston Review of Books, Connecticut Poetry Review, Poetry East, and many other magazines. He has taught high school English and college writing. A master letterpress printer, he ran Adestra Press for 40 years, publishing poets from all over the country. And now I would like to introduce you to Gary.
Gloria, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you even more for publishing the book. It's my second title with you, and when I put that manuscript together, I thought of you right away. It would be the perfect home for it, and it's turned out to be that way, so thank you. And thanks also to Harris for that wonderful blurb that he gave me. So this book, Marble Dust, is all about mine and my wife's European travels over the years, the tours and vacations and trips that we've taken. It's in four parts. Part one is about the Greek ruins and Greek society, Greek mythology, with some Turkey in it too, because there's Greek ruins all over the east coast of, or the west coast of Turkey. Part two is about Italy and Rome and Roman ruins. Part three is a long 25-page poem on the life and contemporary meeting of Francis of Assisi. Visiting the basilica there was just so inspiring. I was writing the poem already in my head even before we got back on the bus to head back to the hotel. And part four is a mixture of various poems from throughout Europe. I'm going to start with part one, the first book in the poem, Marble Dust, the title book, and it goes like this. These are the shoes I wore to walk the Acropolis in Athens. I propped a foot on the Parthenon's top step to place my eyes within the cold glow of marble to better trace the column's curve, up to the pediment and the cobalt sky beyond, empty of clouds, empty of gods. Empires and deities come and gone, all those orations, the pledges, the routine, the grandiose, evaporated, circling, invisible above us. Men and marble, one temporary, one a truth revealed. Plato and Phidias, Pericles and Archimedes, all dust that I carry lovingly on these shoes. The inspiration for that came one day when I was teaching my first year college students, and I had to bend down and tie my shoe in the middle of class, and I realized those are the same shoes I had just worn a few weeks before in Greece, and there was actual dust on it. And the images of being there at the Acropolis and the Parthenon stuff came to me flooding like crazy, and I started writing it in my head as I was actually working on a writing lesson with the class. So I think most of us have been in some kind of museum or other where behind glass cabinets are little artifacts lined up. And this is from the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where there's a whole line of different ancient artifacts. And one of them was a small crown, uh, which they called a diadem. And looking at it, there was no other information other than the catalog number. Looking at it, I just imagined who wore that? What was the occasion of her wearing it? Because it's a smaller one, so it was either for a child or for a young woman. And I imagine a young woman because I wanted to make a love story out of it. So here's a poem. Number 4729, silver diadem with dentelated border. This small crown, tarnished by age, so that no gleam shines through the glass display, rests with a dozen other artifacts, shards of pottery, clay figurines, mostly broken, and simple twists and coils of thin gold, earrings, brooches, pins, all time stained, redeemed from Cyclades earth and reduced to catalog number. This crown exists without history, without metaphor. It is itself, nothing more. But some father had wealth and love enough to order this crown, to place it on a daughter's head and smile at her new beauty, which she, princess now, wore strolling the island's agora above the rocky shore and stopping to stare into the Aegean mist, where her dream of love continued. Him, sailing through storm swells, blown from island to island, toward her, without knowing this destiny she desired. Each day she added more to the story, stared longer in ankle-deep sea. Each day she prayed, first Artemis, then Aphrodite. Each day he drew closer in her heart. But Herodotus is silent. She is without Homer, no Sophocles, no God-shaped swan enfolded in feathers, no lyric entrusted to memory and chanted at annual festival with song and sacrifice, no likeness in marble with bare shoulders or breasts curving to shape imaginations, no treasures unearthed with her bones, not even bones, just a diadem on a glass shelf, dentelated, growing darker each year. But once there was a dream larger than an island, and standing on its shore, a girl with dawnlight sprinkled in her crown. All imaginary, of course, but it was fun to imagine that. This next poem is in three parts, but I'm only going to read the first part of it. It's called The Flesh and Marble, and it's about the reconstruction of the actual Parthenon and about its original construction too. Mallet and chisel in strong hands carve this marble. A freeman, artisan, enjoying bread and yogurt at day's end. It is not the gods in the hand. It was the full belly that fires the dreams and reaching up, up, stones rising like smoke, like wind made solid, a miracle greater than Zeus becomes swan. It was not the lust after gods that raised the columns, that anchored them in air with architrave, as Archimedes said it would. Clouds, shapeless, drifted away. Maybe the temple did please Athena, but it pleased the eyes of men more, the dream of perfection. It was the old olive harvest, plentiful at last. When temple columns swell and lean with entasis to fool the eye, the gods gain nothing. It was not magic, but mathematics. Even if the pediments were adorned with immortals, men made them. Without Helen and Paris, what was Aphrodite? Flesh and blood pumped into the heavens into being, up and down the Acropolis, stones as broken as the gods. The next poem is called Stealing Troy, and it's in four numbered parts. I'm only going to read part two. And I taught the Iliad to high school seniors for about 15 years, and I taught the Odyssey to high school freshmen for about 20 years. So I was pretty steeped in Troy itself and its history. And I finally got to visit it. Unfortunately, I was retired at the time because I found out later on that if I would have gone, while I was still teaching, I could have deducted about $4,000 off my income tax for educational purposes. No one told me that. Well, that's the way it is. But Troy and what they're trying to do, mostly a team of French university professor archaeologists are trying to restore it. But walking amongst it, you could just feel, Homer, you could feel Paris, Hector, all of them. This is part two. Wind in the cypress, and the wild olive laughing at honor, at flesh and bone, at their delusion of permanence. Grass and wildflowers germinating in the whitening cracks and fissures of Troy, its stones split, charred, scattered. Marble columns buried and broken like stone worms, breathless, unable to undulate. Marble walks smothered in upheaved earth and vegetation. Only jawbone of cat, tibia of mouse, whitened on the ground. Flame the lichen, its gradual millennial meal on stone. The grains of sand blowing from seashore to explode on stone. Troy fallen to blood, to fire, to disguise avarice, for the greater good of Agamemnon and all that. 9 times Troy rose and fell to anger, to pestilence, to erosion, to the cloudy memory of men. Look, Aphrodite dancing her jealous dance atop Mount Ida with her one promise for the one boy tending his father's sheep. Look, Helen dancing the fire dance in the temple about to fall as she succumbs again to plaything of men and gods. Look, Sophia Schliemann, adorned and a glitter in gold, posing and dancing for her husband's delight and desire. Once the walls were golden in the sunset. Once the sea shimmered against the plains, but withdrew the horror of tides without amminusis. Tides of blood and wailing rose and fell in the breach, in the breath swell of women dancing their desperation, dancing into destiny. City and field deserted, plundered. Walk in the ruins of Troy today and feel the years themselves crumbling through the heart. Here we go to Rome and the Roman ruins. This poem is called "A Kiss Behind the Campo deglia." And the Campo deglia is the tallest of the 7 mountains of the city of Rome. And it's been the seat of government for Rome and Italy since ancient times. What matters the full moon gracing this horizon, showering its cool light upon the cold marble? Yes, it is beautiful, but ghostly, more a gasp, less a sigh. Not something Botticelli would clothe with color, more fit for film noir. A man meets on the street a woman he once loved, a simple hug and brush of lips on cheek. They walk a little without speaking, eyes moist, cigarette ash growing, the same forum as background. You and I make it real with a kiss in the still warm Roman night. To the south, we see the Colosseum with upper arches glowing in subdued light, as if they once held up the heavens and were crushed. Tomorrow, we will climb its broad steps to the top, look down on Rome like visiting dignitaries, frame a few pictures, believe we hear the clash of swords and lions roar. But tonight we stand on concrete that will not last 2,000 years. When a bus that has a few hints of rust arrives, we board it, return to the hotel, and dream the dream of immortality. One of the places I absolutely wanted to make sure I got to in Rome was the Keats Shelley Memorial House. It's the house that John Keats lived in up until his death, his last few years there. And Shelley stayed with him periodically. And so I had to arrange it on my own, and I had the hotel desk clerk get me a cab late one afternoon before it closed. And so I rode there in the cab, and it was an interesting little narration that went on here. So this poem is called "In Three Languages." I'm riding in a cab from the outskirts to the center of Rome. The driver has no English. I have only a few phrases from the guidebook. Quando il treno va, che costa? We idle in bundled lines. The museum closes in an hour. Exhaust, horns, and shouting surround us, but the silence inside the cab as thick as the traffic outside. When the light changes, everyone rushes to the next wait, a few dozen meters ahead. I say to myself, I think, bitte mach schnell. The driver hears us, says, Sprechen Sie Deutsch? When I answer, Ja, ein bisschen Deutsch. Sind Sie Amerikaner? He asks. Again, Ja. And I, Sind Sie Italiener? It's his turn to say, Ja. Our eyes meet in the rearview mirror, and we laugh. We drive like this, the American tourist talking German to the Italian cab driver. I tell Rosario I learned German 30 years ago when I was a soldier stationed in Germany. He drove cab in Zurich for 3 years, 30 years ago. We toast each other in three languages. He asks, what is at the address I gave him in writing? I tell him it is a museum for an English poet who, being a true gentleman, left England to die in Rome. Rosario likes that. Even if it doesn't know, it is not quite true. And he says, those English, most people come to Rome for amore, but not the English, they are so cold. I ask why he used Italian for love and not the German. He says, Liebe is a good word, but amore is Rome. The German on both our tongues is rusty, and we blurt out phrases as they come to us. I tried to tell him of another English poet who came to Italy with his English bride, also a poet, because they know Rome is a place for love. He tells me, L'amore è Roma is the phrase. I thank him, tell him the bride is buried in Firenze, that I am going there tomorrow. When I leave the cab, we wish each other good luck, gutes Glück, buona fortuna. So the next poem is at the Keats Shelley house, okay, outside the Keats Shelley house, and it's right in the Spanish Steps Plaza for any of you who have been there. And almost all of the tourists and the natives who are there gather on the steps every evening almost if the weather's nice, and they sing songs, they drink wine, and the guys try to make time with the girls, etc., etc. None of them knows that right in the corner of the steps is a building that John Keats lived in and died in. Very few of them probably know it's even a museum other than the sign on the front of the building. Outside the Keats Shelley house. I was saying softly the first Keats poem I read, The Maiden, the grace of her kiss, frozen in unwilling youth, is such a melody fixed in memory. Taxis were arriving, and people exited to join the crowd gathering on the Spanish Steps, each one striding higher up to fit in, each man brandishing a bottle of dark wine. But I just stood in front of this building, thinking of how many times, about how time tricks us with a promise, then lies about the death, the way we can see the light in shade, but not the shade in light. I imagine Keats returning from the biblioteca after hours reading and scribbling in letters, all die young. I watched him climb the stone stairs to the door, pause, body bent in spastic coughs until he leaned against that cold wall. He stood shaking in the building shadow, his face angel pale, with whom by now he was intimate in a dark paradise of his routine. He unlatched the door, disappeared inside. As I walked over the threshold, the revelers on the steps beamed into song, 100 voices celebrating their fortune. When I tried to follow Keats up the stairs to his room, he kept ascending. We all know the glory that is the statue David that Michelangelo made. But in the museum in Florence, where Michelangelo's David is in the center of a conjunction of corridors, and is on a special display, a special pedestal, special lights from the ceilings and everything else. And when we stood there circling around it, admiring it, and when we left as a group of tourists, we walked by one of the corridors, and lined up in the corridor were these 4 marble statues that Michelangelo never finished. There's a name for them, and I can't remember the name right now, but historically it's there. One of the last one was labeled Saint Matthew, and so I just stood there briefly and looked at that statue and said, "Why the heck didn't he finish it? What was wrong with the statue, or with him, or with his day, or whatever?" So I just imagine that this is why he didn't finish it. Saint Matthew and the stone. What was it Michelangelo saw in the heart of his Matthew that he abandoned him in Carrara marble, struggling to be free, to stand in air, to be almost man, yet more than man? The months of chipping away, white flecks of stone, came to nothing. Michelangelo walked away. He left Matthew's leg bent at the knee, trying to step from his marble prison, anguish frozen on his unfinished eyes. The sculptor blind to such a plea. Not even the half-formed gospel, hinting at God's breath, held high in Matthew's left hand, could urge him back to mallet and chisel. So Matthew stands today, crowded in a museum corridor, an unfinished prelude to the masterpiece, to David, haloed in light, solitary, regal. Michelangelo found something dark deep in the heart of that stone and walked away. And we'll never know. This particular trip to Italy was one of those bus trips. You know, there were, I don't know, 58 of us or something like that on the bus, and we visited 7 Italian cities, a northern route, 7 cities in 14 days. So we were coming and going all the time. But we did, and I was really, really pleased with this. We did go to Verona, Italy, and spent a little bit of time in there, had lunch and everything else. And we went over to Juliet's balcony. The city of Verona actually has dedicated a specific balcony as being Juliet's. There was a movie made after I was in Verona about the letters to Juliet, you know, which is a really interesting movie. And I was so pleased to see it because I was right there. Juliet on the balcony. For years, the people here offered their balconies as Juliet's. And town fathers searched every street to find the one balcony that fit the story. And they did. Pronouncements were made, a plaque erected, a statue commissioned. It is here, in this little courtyard, through an arched alley of a back street now crowded with shops, trattorias, and tourists. Everyone looking for love, and we also came in a bus full of seekers. Declarations in many languages are scratched on the old stone walls of the courtyard. I saw amore in one and you, liba, in another. There are scraps of paper glued to the stones with phone numbers and email addresses. So many starved for love. A bronze Juliet stands demurely at the end of the courtyard. Couples line up for a picture with her. Each man cups a hand on the statue's right breast. Her small mound glows after years of such a touch. For €2, Natalie gets to climb 2 flights of stairs and stand on Juliet's balcony. She waves to the crowd below in the courtyard, but her smile is for me. I snap a photograph and ask myself if I would scale that wall to steal a kiss from Juliet. All of this, of course, is not real, not authentic. Romeo never climbed that wall, never said, "But soft what light through yonder window breaks. It is my Juliet, it is my love." But I said it, almost shouted it, when you appeared up there, waved to the crowd, and smiled at me. I'm going to read 2 little sections from the St. Francis poem. This is the first section. When a young man saw the beggar's rags, did he offer his coat with the words, "Forgive the gold thread, its glitter"? When the young man's father saw this, did he think, as he had the boy arrested, "He shall not inherit my fortune"? Because he could not sleep in jail, the young man prayed away the hours, the days, and in those rhythms found happiness, peace. When he left that cell, did he search for the well-dressed beggar? Did he thank him? As I said, this is a long poem. It's in 7 numbered parts. It's 25 pages long in the book. And some of the numbered parts also have sub-numbered parts. So I'm going to read a little bit from the section 2. And Pope Innocent III dreamed a poor man would come to him from Assisi. And Francis came to him with 11 followers. And Innocent gave sanction to their rule: poverty, chastity, obedience. They walked forth 2 by 2 from place to place, like children singing their joy. Came Peter of Cantaneo, who would later gather the lepers, and Francis prayed with them and ate off their plates. Came Maceo, who accompanied Francis 2 by 2, preaching, praying. Came Pacificus, who in the world had been a poet. And Francis himself went to convert the Muslims, and he too became ill. Food too rich, prayers too public, too prolific, the line between deep, irrevocable. But Francis kept wandering, preaching in Italy, in the vernacular, never alone. Clergy and townspeople paraded behind him as he walked into their village. He stood in the marketplace, a magnet. On church steps, a magnet. Or from the walls of castle courtyards, a magnet. Enraptured, church bells sounded. Enraptured, people sang. They brought their sick for him to bless, to heal. They kissed the ground on which he trod. They cut pieces of his tunic until he left the village poorer and richer. But that poem, it's a 25-page poem, 7 different numbered parts. Took a long time to actually write, but I had the core of it down, and I did a lot of extra research on the life of Francis that is known, and some of the things that are not known about him. I was raised a Catholic, so that was kind of my own heritage as a Catholic American boy. So I don't want to bore you with any more of Francis. Instead, let's look at the beautiful language. This again, my wife and I were in Rotterdam, Belgium, and there was a woman sitting on a bench by the canal, and she has such a far away look in her eyes, like she was in another dimension entirely. And so I wrote this poem about her and imagining what that dimension might be in the midst of all the other tourists there and myself and my wife there. The beautiful language. She sits again on a bench along the canal in Rotterdam, waiting. This is where he will come, she whispers to herself. She feels him staring under her bones. Behind her, the Euromast rises, swaying gently in the permanent breeze, its tiered cafe full of quiet activity. Tourists smile at the demi-tasses and the scenery, both grateful and awed to be here. Even their children are subdued with this now in their lives, this moment they will not remember as adults. Lovers gaze into narrowing eyes, knees kissing beneath the small tables. They could be anywhere in the world, and that place would still be heightened by their inflamed blood. On the roof, a young American and his bride marvel at these vast lowlands that are someone else's lives. On the bench, a woman waits for the angel who appeared in her dream. His silver eyes glowed with rapture. He drifted by in a boat on the air. She doesn't know if he will greet her in Dutch or French or some language known only in the heart. Her heart is ready. The young couple, high above her, sway in the wind-washed air and embrace in the only beautiful language possible between flesh and flesh. One of our favorite places in Europe is Austria. Any place in Austria is really good. Salzburg is probably our favorite city in the world. A cable car ride is this one here. It's in Kitzbühel, Austria, and it's the summer. And even though this is a ski resort, they run the cable cars for rides up to the top of the mountains all the time. There's a little cafe up at the top. You can get a nice little coffee or a little cognac or something nice like that, you know. So we decided to go up there one time. Cable car ride. 6 of us climb into the red cable car with one desire, the height of gods. We swing, we sway on wire that seems too thin, but isn't. We joke about accidents, about what our bodies would look like crushed below. When we step from the car, we sigh, then laugh. The air atop an alpine mountain in August thrills more than lungs. Each deep breath brings us closer to the makers of this world, spread below us like a board game. Put a village here, a trolley car there. Push the sun to a farther village. Have geese alight on this lake. We watch the white clouds kiss the next peak and grow jealous we are not over there, hugged by heaven like the angels. A couple of you know that I am an absolute Gaga Beatles fan and have been since I bought She Loves You as a single record in 1945. But I like a lot of music. And one of my favorite is Beethoven. And I remember reading a biography of Beethoven shortly after we came back from Venice. And in the biography was a reproduction of a little sketch of a drawing, a pencil sketch of Beethoven walking in the rain in downtown Vienna. So I wrote this poem about that sketch and about having walked the streets of Vienna myself. It's called Beethoven in the Rain. This is in four parts, just like major symphonies are always in four movements. But I'm only going to read part one. And I organized this thing by rhythm and language, according to the rhythm and language, the rhythm, I should say, and the melodies of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Beethoven in the Rain, part one. Such an old man alone on the streets in the rain in Vienna. Such a squat old man with greatcoat to the ankles, with haggard boots shattering puddles like chandelier fugues, while splashing and soaking the hem of disregard for fashion and clothing, emperor or music. Such an old man alone, ignoring each new step along the Danube weg, because Napoleon rears his horse toward Austria, because the body of Haydn rots in the soaked and silent ground, because there is no other substance than pure sound. Such an old man walking with eyes beyond the rain, with with ears as useful as the blind moon above the rain. Such an old man shuffling through water-drawn cobblestone without the patience of stone, without water's direction, but ablaze with its gravity. An old man without patron or position, walking through destiny's sodden fog, who crosses the city square to be named Mozartplatz, who passes the forlornness of the rollicking concert halls, who snubs each ghost that sang to the velvet seats, or played there some sacred echo, or kept the score clogged with baton, because the last scribblings at the piano are always bruised, because the past makes less sense than the unscripted music sounding beyond the reverie of dream, beyond what rises again in the hollows of the chest to command the soul to seize each note and drench it in beauty. Such an old man walking in the rain. We were in Switzerland during the summer when the polar ice caps, not the polar ice caps, the alpine ice caps started to melt profusely. And it was in the 90s that summer throughout all of Europe, and there were people dying from the heat, and the governments didn't know what to do. And in places like Switzerland, it's really rare to find air conditioning anywhere. You know, they might have ceiling fans, but air conditioning, forget that. I hope that's changed by now. I haven't been back to Switzerland in a few years, so I'm not sure. But I was sitting on the balcony of the hotel just watching the full moon rise over the lake. And this is what I wrote. A full moon in Switzerland. The Alps alter all perspective. From the balcony of Hotel Bruning in Hergesville near Lucerne, the full August moon rises at the same angle Mount Pilatus slopes its black bulk to the lake, whose dark water ripples and dims the light reflected as the moon struggles to lift above the line of rock and gravity. I wonder how deep into the deep lake the moon's light knifes. If salmon huddle in those depths to ward off this monthly terror. I wonder that the same moon's light earlier shone on the fragments of bodies that the embassy bombed in Nairobi, or on the wet cheeks of the families of the dead gathered to mourn. The light of a fisherman's boat glides up the dock with barely a sound. I wonder if he caught the big one. 90-degree heat and humidity in these mountains, the world changing right before our eyes. old people dying, governments struck dumb. I suck ice on this balcony this August, waiting for a breeze, and wonder how many other people use this time to contemplate this moon pushing through their own small square of night. I'm going to finish with this poem, going back to Athens. This actually the second poem of the book is called Making Love in Athens. It's a topic most of us like. The wife from the cafe in the alley beneath our room at Hotel Acropole is shouting at her husband again. Here, where they made lust divine and worshiped the body, she begins each day arguing. Perhaps it is strictly business. Receipts low, Florence swept, the hired help who drinks. Last night, when we sat on the wobbly chairs on the cobbled walk and ordered tea and shared dessert, she nodded and smiled from behind the bar. Is it darkness that calms her the way it did Clytemnestra? Maybe her husband, short and balding, looks too long at the young women so free with their boyfriends, chatting and eating, their eyes lowered beneath the rising moon. Here, where cities and dynasties has crumbled because of love, we lie, listening to our pulses quieting as the woman's anger ignites. We would shut the window and live just within ourselves, as Persephone learned to do. But we know a few minutes more will subside her ire, and then the only sound will be starched sheets wrinkling. Thank you.